Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. I apologize for the state of my voice. I am still sick, which is why you can see I've got a little bit of tea over here. I've got a blanket. I've been chilling. I didn't go to work today because I've been feeling a bit rough, which means I had time on my hands. So I apologize for all of the funny noises that I might make if I cough and all of these sorts of things. Um, please bear with me, you know. Um, but yeah, it is what it is, and I thank you for your patience and your understanding. So, ladies and gentlemen, what we have today. So, those some of you might have seen my last video, where I refute the 30 reasons that a specific pastor gave for not wearing a wedding ring, and in that time, certain responses have been given because there were people on his profile page that were commenting. Some people took umbrage took umbrage with his post and decided that they would take him to task on certain issues. For those of you who are curious, this is genuine uh, jasmine, so it's not that green tea and jasmine with jasmine flavoring sort of thing. This is actual jasmine and ginseng, also real ginseng. It's a really good tea. They take the jasmine flower and they layer, they sort of take the leaves, and then they put the flowers and they put the leaves, and they do a couple of layers and then compress it so that the aromatic oils of the jasmine flower soak into the leaves, and then they roll it up and dry it, so you get like little tiny little balls. They're called dragon pearls, and then you put five of those into a teapot, and it makes an absolutely beautiful jasmine tea. It's really, really good. Anyway, so some people took umbrage with his posts, and some of them being followers of his, or whatever the case might be. Some people made silly objections, which is what you always get. Some people made absolutely silly objections. So if I say that someone's making a silly objection, it's not because I'm defending him, but at the end of the day, the whole point of this is that whatever you say to other people, whether you're making argument or whether you're refuting an argument, it's got to make sense, right? It's if the person's wrong, it doesn't help for you to go in and make a stupid comment or something like that, or be completely just fly off the handle, whatever the case might be. It doesn't help the situation at all. So let me just bring this a little bit closer. Um, so I'm going to go with three specific responses, because as far as I could tell, these are the only ones that he himself has given. So these are responses that he himself has given to people. And I have not bothered to approach him. The reason for this is because in the past, I have tried to talk to him. You might as well beat your head against the wall, and you're going to see this come up now. Um, and I'm going to, so we're just going to go through it, and I'm going to give you guys maybe some tools, some ways of recognizing when someone is really being dishonest, so that you just don't waste your time, right? Sort of thing. Life's too short. So let's get right stuck into it. Let's see what happens, right? So a person took umbrage with statement number 16, and said that 16 is an absolute statement that can't be backed up. So statement number 16 was the following: rings have not stopped one act of adultery or fornication. Um, so so this objection is a silly objection. I mean, it's self-evident that wedding rings have pardon me, excuse me. It's self-evident that rings do not stop people from cheating. It's just that simple. And then they're not designed to. And even if they were designed to, they would it would be a stupid design, because nothing can stop a person from doing what they want to do, right? Short of shooting them in the head, right? If someone really wants to do something, they're going to do it, right? Not even the laws of God can prevent man from a single sin. right? Because we've been given free will. So short of tyranny, right, you can't stop people from doing what they want to do, right? There has to be a change in the heart and in the spirit, sort of thing. And it's one thing that modern societies, under atheist regimes and stuff like that, specifically under the secular regime, especially these days, your leftist types, and the leftists and the people on the left and the people on the right, they take their turns. They imagine that by simply inventing more legislation, that somehow this is going to get people to behave. It's ridiculous. If the moral decay of the country continues to decay, continues to get worse, you can legislate people up the wazoo. It's going to make no difference. The only thing you're going to do is bring in tyranny. So the person says it's an absolute statement that cannot be backed up. It's a ridiculous objection. So you might ask me, well, if it's a ridiculous objection, why do you even bring it up? The reason I bring it up, ladies and gentlemen, is because of his response. And you people need to be aware of responses of this kind, like this, right? Let me show you his response. So what happens a lot of times, people will go on the internet, they'll do a quick word search. So she's saying, oh, this can't be backed up. And so his response, automatic knee-jerk response, is going to be, let me see if I can back it up, right? And so he'll go on the internet, do a quick word search, and literally anything that comes up that validates what he's saying, he'll just throw the link at you, right? And now, if you are not a person who's discerning, you're going to get deceived like this, because he's going to throw something at you. An intelligent person would take the time to send you a link that at least looks respectable. But you can see in this situation, he didn't even do that, right? Let's have a look here. So this is the website, Bold Sky. Now, let me tell you something, ladies and gentlemen. Because here's the thing, the person responding looked like they were taken aback. And it's like, oh, well, I'm not disputing the article or the study, right? The person said, this is not a study. This thing is literally some random person's uninformed opinion that they literally, as far as I can tell, pulled out of thin air, right? So let's have a look. How do you tell whether a thing, first of all, Bold Sky, have you ever heard of Bold Sky? Well, there's probably a reason for this, right? It's because this is a tabloid, ladies and gentlemen. All this stuff here is garbage, right? And you can see it's just advert after advert, right? It's just advert after advert. This is your first clue, ladies and gentlemen, whether something is something is worth your time or not. If you immediately get slapped in the face with 20,000 adverts, right? That's your first clue. This thing exists for no other reason than to generate ad revenue. The content is irrelevant, is absolutely irrelevant. This is to generate revenue, right? A second thing is, if you look at it, unless it's a legitimate news outlet, right? You're going to see what you see at the top here, right? Fashion, beauty, health, whatever. So the subjects, they're promiscuous in how they deal with subjects, right? That's, again, your first clue in how you can tell that this is not any kind of reasonable journalism, unless it's a well-known, like even if it's CNN and stuff like that, but CNN, BBC, whatever the case might be, right? Where the website will talk a lot about many different subjects. Your tabloids do the same thing, right? It's this promiscuous nonsense. They don't stick to one thing. If it was a study, like from some scientific journal or something like that, it would usually be a lot more focused. The website would be dedicated to a specific genre or specific whatever the case might be, right? So this is one of the ways you can tell. Second of all, if you click on this person's name, it usually takes you to another page that should, in principle, give you their profile. So let's see. Let's do this, right? Let's go to their profile. Her name. She previously rolled for Bold Sky. So she literally has no credentials whatsoever. No credentials whatsoever, right? So she's literally just pulling this out of thin air, right? And then if you and then in neither in the beginning nor in the body of the thing. So she's got 10 ways to stop nagging a woman from nagging, right? How's that for a subject? Okay. Usually if it's something legitimate, when you are reading the article, sometimes you have hyperlinks that you can link to, and the hyperlink will link to a study that they're referring to. Or they will have a little number on the top that's a reference, and then all the references are at the bottom. So if we go all the way to the bottom, what do you see? There are no references at all. Right. So this is literally nothing but an absolute trash opinion column written by some random who knows what. So this is how this individual, right? So just by looking at this, right, you can see in many ways my assessments in my earlier video seem to be like they're validated here. He is not interested at all in arguing in good faith. There's no desire here to argue in good faith. He's absolutely so self-assured of himself that he's absolutely wrong, and he has such contempt for the people that are challenging him that he can't even be bothered to link a legitimate study, right? So he puts up this absolute trash of an article. Why single men chase women, and most of it is just garbage. It's not true, right? The fact of the matter is, right, that why people cheat is a bit of a complex thing. People have their various different motivations and stuff like that. So, for example, um, women are actually more likely to go for married men than men are to go for married women. Why is this? Right? Married men are more likely to go for younger women, right? And it's more likely, men are actually more likely to cheat the older they are, sort of thing. Um, and I've got a study over here that we can maybe go through, or I'll link it, or whatever the case might be. There's a decent website here that goes through all of the statistics, right? But men are more likely to cheat. So the reason a woman is more likely to cheat or be attracted to a married man is because it is very difficult when glancing at an individual to know what kind of quality this individual is, right? A person can look very nice, but could turn out to be a sociopath or a psychopath that's going to kill you in the basement. So when a woman sees a man with a ring, right, the fact that he's married is a proxy for how decent he is, right? For how decent he is, right? Oh, he's obviously marriage material. I want that. All right. So that's one reason in terms of women selecting, right? Women are looking for things, and this is everyone, right? Men or women. We're looking for things that serve as indicators of the kind of quality of the individual that we are attempting to pursue. What is this person like? And so if the guy is married, well, then he must be worth something, isn't it? It's a very easy way. And so if I go for a married guy rather than unmarried men, then my odds are better, right? So that's one reason. And then married men tend to go for younger women, right? Because why? Well, because men are attracted to youthfulness, vitality, and all these kinds of things. Duh, right? It's the biological instinct. Because at the end of the day, we are animals, are we not? Humans, the Bible says, we on a biological sense, we're like the animals, and so we are attracted to physical proxies that indicate health, um, fertility, and all of these kinds of things, right? So when women wear makeup, for example, the eyeliner, the dark eyeshadow, the lipstick, and wear high heels, what they're doing is they are accentuating secondary sexual indicators of not only fertility but of sexual readiness, right? So if a man looks at a woman who is all dolled up, right? High heels and stuff like that. And high heels elongate the legs, right? And accentuate the calf muscles. Um, when a man looks at a woman like that, subconsciously, his lizard brain is saying she is attracted to me, right? Because when a woman is sexually aroused, the her eyes, the area around her eyes darken, the lips go a little bit more red, the cheeks flush when she's sexually aroused, right? And if a woman is not all dolled up, she looks quite boring, right? This is on purpose because women were not designed to flash sexual preparedness left, right, and center 24 hours a day. This is what women are doing when they're wearing makeup, right? Um, so the man's lizard brain sees this and detects signs of sexual arousal. And so it's like, well, she's looking at me, so she must be aroused by me, and then that triggers certain things, right? And the guy has got no control over this whatsoever. Your body was designed to simply react and to detect. So a man will detect these things very, very quickly, right? Because men are more visual than women are for various reasons, right? So for men, depth perception and things like that, spatial perception and stuff like that is more acute. Men are more visual. Although women, they can discern more colors, right? So if you show men, if you take a color chart where there's a very, very slow gradation from one color to another color, and a man, and you tell a man to look at it and draw a line where he sees the colors separate, and you tell a woman to do the same thing, a woman will discern significantly more gradations of colors. A woman can distinguish more colors. So for woman, the world is literally more colorful for her than it is for a man. Okay, so there's these biological things there that are of of note, and then the spatial awareness of men. It's why, again, men are better at sports, generally better at driving, spatial awareness, or that things that involve that sort of thing, right? And attention to movement and all these kinds of things. So this is basically why. And then also there's pathological reasons, sort of thing. So for a woman to be able to take a man, right? Because the wedding, and this is how ignorant people are, right? The wedding band shows that there's this marriage there, which represents a very powerful commitment. And if she has the power to overthrow that commitment, to undermine that commitment, what gives her what in psychology is called narcissistic supply. A narcissistic woman will pursue married men because it gives narcissistic supply. I'm irresistible, so irresistible that even a married man cannot resist me, right? She's not interested in the little low quality morons sort of thing. She's interested in the guy who's in the successful business guy who's married, sort of thing, right? Because it gives her narcissistic supply. And it's the same thing for men as well, right? A lot of the time, people say, well, why is it that when we look at the celebrities and stuff like that, that these men who have these absolutely beautiful celebrity wives, why do they cheat on the wives? The reason for that is because a narcissist is not interested in whether a woman is beautiful or whether she's ugly, contrary to popular belief. A narcissist is interested in narcissistic supply, right? So if tomorrow, right, being obese was fashionable, then he would date and marry a person who was obese, if that could earn him the praise and the adulation of other people. You see, right? So the attractiveness or the unattractiveness of the woman is absolutely irrelevant. What's relevant to a narcissist is how good he looks for the acquisition, right? So it's the same thing. You get these guys when they buy Ferraris and they buy Lamborghinis or whatever the case might be. They don't care about the Lamborghini. They only care about what the Lamborghini says, right? And it's actually the same thing, ironically, interestingly enough, when it comes to things like wedding rings and stuff like that. A plain wedding ring or a wedding band is not a problem, and the idea that a wedding ring is a gateway to whatever else is completely ridiculous. However, if the person is narcissistic, then they want to be flashy. right? Sort of thing. So these kinds of considerations are genuine considerations, but not for everyone, because not everyone is narcissistic, not everyone's inclined that way, and all these kinds of things. So these are the considerations out there, sort of thing, if people can actually be bothered to study the scientific literature, right? So let's go to his next question. So someone says to him, so someone actually commented to him and said, "Oh, look, you're stirring the hornet's nest." And he says, "Notice it says why I don't. It doesn't say why you shouldn't. Regardless, people will get a bee in their bonnet." All right. Now, I'm not saying this guy is a narcissist. Okay? You cannot diagnose someone online like this. You cannot do it. However, you can identify a narcissistic style. Now, one of those things that's very, very indicative of someone who's got a narcissistic style is basically being passive aggressive. And we all have those people in our lives, right? They're saying something, but they're not really saying it. I'm still your friend. But there's those barbs. Oh, I'm not judging you, but you could, what? Oh, look at those shoes, right? There's that passive aggressiveness. I'm saying it, but I'm not saying it. I'm judging you, but I'm not judging you, right? It's this pretension, right? It's this pretentiousness that makes people sick, and that's what people are reacting to here, sort of thing. And so when we look and let's see more evidence of this. This is what he wrote at the end. I only read a little bit of it, but at the end of his 30 lists, of his list of 30, this is what he wrote, right? "I believe to dress plainly, abstaining from display of jewelry, ornaments of every kind, in keeping with biblical faith." So this is a judgment. If you don't do it, you're not keeping with biblical faith. It's a judgment. He says, "I write here not to condemn anyone." This is a condemnation. If you don't do this, you are not keeping with biblical faith. While the 25 points can be discovered in the Bible or verified, you can't find a reference, so there's 30 points, not 25. Please let me know. I'll supply it. My summary in an essay on the topic is in development. Yeah, I can just imagine what that's going to be like. So I'm prepared to concede or acknowledge various points. So, no, he's not. I guarantee. And he says, "By the way, I write above not to condemn anyone who wears the band, but rather to stir up in the minds of God's people to ask themselves, Lord, what is..." So this is this pretentious way of condemning but not condemning, right? "Lord, what is your will for my life? Pleasing God is my highest aim. But if you don't do this, well then, and I hope it is yours too." This is passive aggressive to the max. Okay? "May our conscience be pure in how we follow our Lord." Right? But if you disagree with him, then what? You get nonsense, sort of thing. This is very, very passive aggressive, right? And it's because here's the thing, right? If he says it, notice it says, it's why I don't. It doesn't say why you shouldn't. If you're only saying, "Oh, this is why I don't do it," then why are you telling anyone? What makes you think anyone gives a damn? If what you're saying is not an objective truth, right? And truth is a judge. End of story. And this is what people need to understand. This is why people hate the truth, because the truth is a judge. When you speak the truth, you don't need to condemn anyone when you speak the truth. The truth does the judging and the condemnation on its own. The person's conscience does the judging and the condemnation on their own. You see? So if it's true, if it's objectively true, you should just say, this proposition, wedding rings, we shouldn't wear wedding rings, right? And the word shouldn't implies moral values and duties. You should and should not, right? It's not a suggestion, right? But he's referencing the Bible. He's talking about it's a pagan tradition and all that kind of stuff. So the idea that he's not saying that you shouldn't do it is absurd. It's absolutely absurd. His entire, everything he's saying, he's tripping over himself. It's incoherent mess. It's passive aggressive. It's narcissistic. It's a highly, highly narcissistic style. It's a highly, highly narcissistic and incoherent and lacking in good faith way of dealing with the subject and dealing with the people who are coming up to him. And so, and we've all met Ministers like this, fellow church members like this, people like this, right? This passive aggressive, oh, I'm not condemning. I'm not saying, I'm just saying how I do it, right? Well, then, if it's really not, that doesn't have the weight where you are actually saying you shouldn't do it. If it does not carrying that weight, then the only thing you're doing is moral posturing. Then it's virtue signaling is what you're doing, which is Pharisaism. It's narcissistic. So this is narcissistic no matter which way you cut it, right? Then he posts this quote from Ellen White in fifth testimonies, right? She's got a whole series. Agitate, agitate, agitate. The subjects which we present to the world must be to us a living reality. So we must embody what we preach and believe. Makes sense. Nothing wrong there. It's important that in defending the doctrines which we consider fundamental articles of faith, we should never allow ourselves to employ arguments that are not wholly sound. It's true. These may avail to silence the opposer, but they do not honor the truth. We should present sound arguments that will not only silence our opponents, but will bear the closest and most searching scrutiny. With those who have educated themselves as debaters, there is a great danger that they will not handle the word of God in fairness. So basically, the more intelligent you are and the more skilled you are at debating, the more skill you have to actually be dishonest and get away with it, right? So she's warning against that possibility, sort of thing. In meeting an opponent, it should be our earnest effort to present subjects in a manner as to awaken conviction in his mind, instead of seeking merely to give confidence to the believer. Okay? So Ellen White here is very, very interested in, it's got to be rational, it's got to be whatever. So what Ellen White is saying is absolutely bang on. So why am I bringing it up? I'm bringing it up because the only reason why he writes this is because he thinks this applies to him. And he thinks that anyone who disagrees with him, that this is the class of people, right? The mere fact that he posts this means that he presupposes before argument, a priori, that he's correct, and that anyone who argues with him is merely an educated person who's not handling God's word with fairness. And he presupposes that he's handling God's word with fairness, right? Is putting the cart before the horse, you see, before he's even properly substantiated any of his claims. And we can see what the nature of his substantiations are like. They're pathetic. And again, this is a very, very narcissistic style, right? The person puts their argument, but rather than actually properly come and address the arguments and hash things out and be patient and stuff like that, they immediately put out something that says, well, if you disagree with me, then it means that you are morally deficient in some way. It means you are unbiblical, you are unwhatever. And this is just so typical of Protestants and evangelicals and just Christians in general, and atheists. Atheists do this as well, by the way. All sorts of people that rather than attending to the argument, they immediately begin to attack your character, to assess your character. This is how a narcissistic person behaves. They don't care about making a good argument, a sound argument, in dealing with just the subject matter on its own, right? They immediately, it's like, this is what I believe, and anyone who disagrees is against God, is against the Bible, is whatever. Immediately, it's the no true Scotsman's fallacy. No true believer would disagree with me. No, anyone who's really Bible-based would not disagree with me. It's the no true Scotsman fallacy, right? It's like no true Scotsman would ever reject Scotch whiskey, kind of thing. Well, that's the fact that your Scottishness has nothing to do with whether you drink Scotch whiskey or not, right? Argue the merit of the proposition in question and stop trying to psychologize your opponent. Stop trying. This is very, very underhanded. This is very narcissistic style. Very, very narcissistic style. This is highly, highly passive aggressive, right? And people don't see it, and people put up with it. Well, just because he's quoted Ellen White, oh, how pious. People do this kind of thing all the time in every denomination, not just Seventh-day Adventist. And let me tell you, Seventh-day Adventists are absolutely very good at this kind of passive-aggressive garbage, right? But I've seen all kinds of Christians do this. And they get away with it. Why? Because they quoted the Bible, because they quoted some prophet. And that's why they get away with it. Because people, as soon as they see the quote from the prophet, they're like, man, how do I disagree with this without, they put it's like there's something in philosophy and logic known as the complex question. Let me give you an example. Let's say I walk up to a man and say, listen, have you stopped beating your wife? Well, he's screwed. If he says yes, it means he was beating his wife. If he says no, it means he's still beating his wife. So I have dishonestly put you into a no-win situation. You see? Do you see how underhanded and how narcissistic and how horrible it is, right? You put the person into this no-win, you back them into a corner that all they can do is just throw up their hands. And this is this manipulation tactic that makes people sick and tired of religious people. This is manipulative, okay? Because the person cannot disagree with you without you beginning to question their moral scruples, right? Their moral credentials. It's really narcissistic. So in the next one, he someone who has access to his who's friends with him and stuff like that. Obviously, they must be friends on Facebook, whatever. Otherwise, you can't see the photos. Has seen the hypocrisy that I mentioned in the previous video, right? That he's got expensive cameras, and he's got expensive this, and he's got expensive that, and expensive this and that, and the next thing, and he seems okay with watches and all that sort of thing. And so he pulls him up on it, right? He pulls him up on it. And I forgot to write it down here, right? But I remember, I know it from memory. So he comes up to him and he says, listen, this is hypocrisy, because I can see in your photos and stuff, I'm paraphrasing now, I can see in your photos and stuff like that, you've got all this other expensive stuff that is not necessary. And yet you're condemning the extravagant expense of rings. And the thing is, the idea that rings need to be extravagant is a red herring, right? So they say, oh, people waste money and stuff. Yeah, people do waste money on wedding rings. But the fact that some people waste stupid money on wedding rings is not an argument against wedding rings. You understand? Because there's no reason why if someone spends a modest, reasonable sum on a wedding ring, that they can't then continue to do it. Then if the cost is the problem, then if you get rid of the cost, then there's no more problem, right? But the cost of things is part of his argument. The thing and the necessity, whether it's necessary or unnecessary. There's no rule in life that we must only do what is absolutely necessary. Rubbish, right? It's unnecessary to cook your food, right? Yeah, but it's probably a good idea, right? And things like this. It's really silly. And so his answer to that, his answer was, it's all relative. Was his answer? It's all relative. Okay. And that just blows the entire whole out. He just completely undermines himself. It's all relative, right? So remember what I said to you in the previous video, right? That you get those people who, if you spend money, no matter how little you spend, it's a waste of money. No matter how much you spend, whether it's a little bit or a lot, it's a waste of money. Because in their personal ideology, they don't approve of the expenditure. But they can blow literally millions overnight. But it's fine. It's justified. Because I have some grand purpose. It's hypocrisy. It's narcissism, right? He's setting himself up as the arbiter of what is or is not necessary, right? Like he could possibly know. Okay? Like he could possibly know what's in the hearts of people, right? Let me give you an example of necessary, right? I know a woman, a very, very attractive woman, right? Very exotic woman in the country that she was residing, because she is Brazilian, right? For those of you who know about Brazilians are considered to be very exotic, right? And so not only, I knew her in South Africa, right? So not only was she exotic, but she was very attractive, and had a very outgoing, very friendly personality, treated people very nicely, right? And she also didn't wear a wedding band, right? She sort of had a similar thing. It's not necessary. I shouldn't do it. But she got so badly harassed at work, right? Because she's attractive. She looked also very young as well. She was actually very young at the time, in her mid 20s, sort of thing. She got married at a very young age. She was, I think, 18 years old when she was married. Um, and she spoke with a heavy Brazilian accent and all these kinds of things. So you can just imagine what the men were like around her, right? Long hair, everything, right? And and the men got, and when she told the men, listen, I'm married, so I'm not interested, they actually, some of them actually got physically aggressive with her because they thought she was lying, just to shrug them off. And so in order to put a stop to the stupidity, she was forced to wear a ring so that people knew from the get-go, right? There were still those that tried their luck, but it never escalated to the point of of almost like a physical confrontation, right? Abusive confrontation, because they knew from the get-go. So there wasn't any kind of so that the man wasn't feeling, because the reason for the reason for the aggression is because the guy is a narcissist who can't take rejection, is unable to take rejection, sort of thing, and who would and so if a woman says, well, no, I'm married, he would take that as her simply rejecting him, sort of thing, and lying and not giving him a chance and all that kind of stuff. Because in his mind, well, if you're not married, you have no excuse but to give me a chance, right? He's narcissistic, he's entitled. So narcissistic men can be like that. And so she wore the ring, and then in order to put a stop to that issue, in that situation, it was necessary to wear a wedding ring, right? Okay, was absolutely necessary. So anyway, this guy points out the hypocrisy and says, listen, I'm just sick and tired of this, right? It's like, when you think it's necessary, then it's necessary. When you don't think it's necessary, it's not necessary, right? When you think it's too expensive, then it's too expensive. But when you want to spend money on these things that I clearly see on Facebook that you spend your money on, you're like, no, it's relative. These expenses are justified. Why? Just according to what? Well, because I say so. And this is it's that self-reference. And this is a narcissist. I'm not going to say he is a narcissist. He might be very humble in other ways and stuff like that. Remember, human beings are complex, right? On this subject and in this circumstance, he might be an absolute bonehead, but in other situations, he might be brilliant and he might be wonderful. Okay, so I'm not demonizing all of him. I'm just saying, in this regard, what we're seeing here is a very, very narcissistic side of the individual. This is a very narcissistic style. This is a very dishonest way of dealing with things. There's no good faith here. And what does he start doing? Right? Now, this one I did capture because I didn't want to forget. This post must have hit a nerve with you. Are you no longer on the straight and narrow path? Okay? So now we know that where he says, oh, I'm not saying you should or should not, we know that that is a lot of BS. There's a straight condemnation. There's a judgment there. Are you no longer on the straight and narrow? And then this is another thing with people. Something that is very narcissistic, and it constitutes abuse. Ladies and gentlemen, understand what I'm saying to you here. This constitutes abuse, right? There is a trend in the world and in people in general, right? That if you show any emotion, or if you are passionate about absolutely anything at all, right, in a way that displeases the other person, you are immediately labeled as being irrational or being whatever the case might be. If you do not emote in a manner that is pre-approved, you are immediately dismissed as someone who is irrational, as someone who has had his conscience pricked by the truth. And this is manipulative. This constitutes abuse, right? Whenever you forbid someone from feeling what they truly, right? Obviously, there are limits to this, right? You can't just go flying off the handle for whatever the case might be. But if you disagree strongly, if you show any emotion whatsoever, you're immediately dismissed. And they immediately start to question your character. They start to question your legitimacy. They start to question your spirituality, right? They try to to, for want, I'm misusing the word, but for want of a better word, they sort of almost try to, what do they call it? What's the word, man? They try to gaslight you, right? No, the only reason you're feeling that way, the only reason why you're disputing with me is because you've departed from the straight and narrow, and you're harboring evil spirits, and this is convicting you, and you're having a struggle with the devil here. The devil is playing on your heart and on your mind. So literally and so this is what these people do, and this is how a narcissistic person, this is how a dishonest person isolates themselves from all criticism by erecting a barrier that's like any opposition means that the other person is somehow morally compromised. And so they insulate themselves completely from ever facing any kind of reproof, any kind of whatever. And the problem when someone starts reaching a celebrity status, right, is that they don't even have to argue a lot of the times. They get so much blind, loving, stupid adoration from people who think that the sun rises and sets off their backside, right, that they then become completely isolated from reality and the reality of what they're doing. This is why you should never put someone in celebrity status. I don't care how much you like the person. Never make someone in celebrity status. And this is why historically the church you only declare someone a saint once they're dead, never before, because that would go to their heads. That risks making the person arrogant, and so on and so forth, right? That's one of the many reasons makes them, and they could lose their salvation as a result. What this guy is doing here, man, is I mean, this is not a person who is at all exhibits any sign whatsoever of even imagine, or of even, there's no kernel in there in his mind at all that he might be wrong. None whatsoever. This is very, very underhanded, dishonest way of arguing. Very, very dishonest. And these answers are shocking, right? Let me give you guys a quick example of what a good source should look like, right? First of all, what are the credentials, right? So let's see here. So here's an investigation agency, right? Posted on December, updated by Whitney Joy Smith. If you click on her name, there she is. Meet the owner, right? Career highlights. So all of her credentials, this is why you should believe her. She's a private investigator, industry awards, and stuff like that, right? So she is actually an investigator. So she has some kind of credential, okay? There's something there. And if you go, and then once you're reading, right, so she refers to actual statistics, right? And you can see it all over the place there, right? And she tells you, she will even tell you where you get them from, where she gets them from. Deseret News Survey, online affairs and cybersex cheating, sort of thing. And so on, as you read it, American Sociological Review. So she's got references, right? Even if she doesn't actually link the reference, she says, you can go to this place, you can go to this place, this is where I'm getting the stuff from, right? And notice, ladies and gentlemen, the absence of 20 million advertisements offering you up every degenerate rubbish, right? This is just an example, right? Is it the best in the world? No, right? Is it the best in the world? No. Why is it not the best in the world? Because it's a second-hand source. That means she is quoting from the primary source. Now, this is not the best. The primary source is always the best, but people don't always understand the primary source, because the primary source can be very, very technical and stuff like that, and so it's very, very difficult for a lot of people to understand. So even though the secondary source is not the absolute gold standard, the best source ultimately is the one you can understand. Right, it's the one that interprets the stuff for you and can put it in a way that the average layman, who's not used to reading statistics and all these kinds of things, can understand. Right, and so there is a, and so this, and she goes into quite a lot of detail. Who cheats? Why do they cheat? What, and all these kind of, and all that kind of information. Right. Why do they? What are the reasons? What are the motives? And all these kinds of things. The differences between the genders, sort of things. So one of the interesting things that a lot of people don't realize is that once upon a time it was absolutely almost an entirely one-sided thing that men would cheat. But now in the modern world, now that women have become entrepreneurs and business people and stuff like that, and they travel abroad, the rate of cheating among women is skyrocketing to the point where they're almost equal to, they cheat almost as much as men do. And so it shows us that the rates of cheating have actually more to do with opportunity than propensity, sort of thing, or inclination. So women are actually just as likely to cheat as men are, if they have the opportunity to do so. Although it's still, the reasons for cheating is still varies quite substantially between men and women. And also who they will cheat with and stuff like that, right? So more often than not, men will cheat with someone they actually know, like a coworker and stuff. And interestingly enough, more women are more likely than not to cheat with someone who's a stranger, right? Who's not a coworker, and all these kinds of things. It's actually very interesting. If you do a study of borderline personality disorder, which is very common in women, you can actually see that come out. There's almost like a self-trashing. It's a terrible thing, disorder to have and stuff like that. And there's also object relation. Very, very interesting to understand the gender differences in cheating. But that's it. So the whole situation is a little bit more nuanced and stuff like that. But there you have it. So, ladies and gentlemen, oh, this is getting painful now. 2 days of this, 3 days. Um, so I hope this helps, and I hope it gives you a way, when you see someone say things, anyone, me too, right? Okay, everyone, step back and pay attention to what they're saying. Break down. Don't just, you know, just because it's an authority or whatever. Yes, there's a certain kind of respect and a degree of deference that we must have towards our ministers and our pastors or our elders or our priests or whatever the case might be, our bishops, whoever it is, right? Because they're in authority. You're right. They've been ordained. This is not a trivial thing, right? But it does not mean, however, that such a person is immune from being narcissistic. In fact, being in a position of power like that makes you even more vulnerable. Makes it even more likely that the person you're dealing with is a narcissist. Why? Because this is what a narcissist craves. A narcissist craves power, craves influence. Narcissists love telling other people what to do, right? They love positions of power. They love positions of influence. They love positions of adoration, of deference, of respect, because that's how they give their narcissistic supply. They don't care about you. They don't care about the position. A narcissist is just as likely to become a social justice warrior and the leader of an activist group as they are to become a priest, because both are positions of power and influence They get the respect of people, right? And all that kind of stuff. And that's why the Pharisees behaved as they did, constantly going on and becoming this very, very least legalistic, right? You can only walk X amount of days on the Sabbath, and showing the world how rigidly they could follow the rules, right? And pretending like this was all the will of God and all that kind of stuff. Here's one of the interesting things. Adolf Hitler was the same way. If you go and study the Nazis, right, and go and look at the photos, you see Adolf Hitler was the same way. He was such a narcissistic individual, right? High conscientiousness, interestingly enough, that if you see, everything was very ordered, everything was very neat, and he used to pride himself on the fact that he could stand for hours in his saluting and talking to the people, and that he had the discipline to stand there for all those hours and do all these kinds of things and all that kind of stuff, and regimenting things and being very orderly and being a tyrant over every little detail. Right? You see this come out, and narcissistic people love that sort of thing. Now, I'm not saying he's a narcissist. I'm not saying that that you could take him to go and get a clinical diagnosis, because the reason, and there's a good chance, I would put money on the fact that he's not a narcissist, because true narcissists are rare. They're not very common. However, not people with a narcissistic style is very common. Right? It's people who don't have the personality disorder, but through various mechanisms or whatever, social pressures, social environment, whatever the case might be, they can, even if they start off not being that way, they can develop a narcissistic style. And you see that if you can get a person who starts, and for example, the story of Saul, King Saul, right? When he started out, he was humble. He was like, hey, he was unassuming. Everyone liked him and whatever. What happened to Saul? What happened to Saul? He became a tyrant. He became a narcissist. The power got to his head. Same thing with Solomon. Lord, make me wise. Forget about the riches. Just make me wise. What happened to Solomon? He became a narcissist. He developed a narcissistic style. Right? He became so enamored with his own wisdom and with his riches and stuff like that. He became an oppressor. He eventually became an oppressor of his people. And this is the same thing that's happening with ministers, preachers like this. They become so enamored with their position, with the adoration, with everything, right? With whatever it is that's going on, right? That they eventually become oppressors rather than shepherds of their people, right? Concerning themselves with rubbish like this, doing things like this as if by merely stating it that people should just agree, and then backing it up with absolute total irrational arguments and responding to criticism in a totally without any good faith whatsoever and stuff like that, and wasting time on silly things, man. Of all of the things he could be concerning himself with, he's worried about this, about wedding rings, right? And so to close off, ladies and gentlemen, I have one last thing. Another minister jumped into the argument and made his own video. This is unrelated, but someone posted this. And this minister made the same boneheaded arguments that this guy made. So there must be so this list must be circulating somewhere out there that all ministers that they copy from and then alter it according to their liking. So one of his arguments is that young kids, right? He's like, even teenagers are smart enough to know that the ring is a piece of jewelry, and therefore this is hypocrisy. Even the young, you can't fool the teenager. Even the young kids know that this is jewelry, and therefore this is hypocrisy. If you don't allow earrings, and you don't allow this and this and this, then even the kids, man. And so who are you? You more. So the implication is you're dumber than a little kid, right? You're more dishonest than a little kid. Now, here's the interesting thing about these people, right? About how there's no epistemic self-consciousness, and there's no, just generally no self-awareness of what they're saying or what they're doing, and the rationale. They don't see themselves. They don't, they never look in the mirror to see, is this true? One of the interesting, and this is why a lot of kids also leave the church, okay? Because when it suits them, kids are too stupid to know anything, and therefore they must just shut up and listen and obey whatever arbitrary, tyrannical nonsense that the leaders spout, whether it makes sense or not, right? And even if it is utter drivel, you are not allowed to say, excuse me, the king has no clothes, without immediately being condemned for being cheeky, for being out of place, for being morally deficient, right? So you have to pretend that the king has no clothes, that the king is fully dressed, right? So when it's convenient, the children are too stupid to make their own decisions, right? But when convenient, they're so clever that it serves as a rhetorical device to tell you that as an adult that you're stupid, that you're lower than a child, right? Now here's the thing, ladies and gentlemen, that's a category error. You see, it's true that a child might say that. A child might look at you and say, you know what? You disallow all of this other stuff, but you wear a wedding band. You're a hypocrite. Now, there's another explanation other than intelligence. You see, the child knows full well that a ring represents something that other jewelry does not. Of all the ornamentation in modern society, in our current social context, all of the ornamentation that a person could possibly put on themselves, watches, it doesn't matter what it is, glasses, right? Some people that have glasses out there, the glasses that they wear, these things are so outrageous. You can see this person wants to do nothing other than gain attention. They might as well put a watermelon on their heads and walk around that way, okay? So even your glasses, which are functional and necessary, can become an item of narcissistic, attention-seeking narcissism, okay? So don't come tell me that whether something is functional or not, that therefore it is okay, okay? Everyone knows that the ring is an absolutely unique item of jewelry, that it represents something that nothing else that you could possibly put on represents. Right. So if the child is trying to make you out like you're a hypocrite, knowing what I know of children and teenagers specifically, chances are they're being obnoxious. They're not being rational. Okay? They're trying to get their way with you. They're trying to manipulate you. Because I'm pretty sure the argument doesn't happen in a vacuum, right? The argument will happen in a situation where you're telling your child, listen, maybe you shouldn't be doing that. And then the child turns around to you and tries to justify his actions by trying to make you out to be a hypocrite. Do children do this? Of course children do this. Yes, they do it all the time, don't they? So essentially, because children are obnoxious, we should give a stupid story about wedding rings. So because children can be obnoxious, because people can be obnoxious, therefore we should get rid of wedding rings. Do you see how, if you take a step back, ladies and gentlemen, and look at these arguments, because let me tell you, this preacher jumping around there on the pulpit like he was, you know, this American style that they have, it's very annoying, right? You know, and carrying on like he's made an absolutely smashing point, man. And every single person in the congregation was like, amen. Hey, what a fantastic point. And it's so weird that not a single person there, even those who have kids, didn't stop and say, hang on, wait a minute. How do you know the child's not just being obnoxious? Because everyone and his dog, right, So it knows that the wedding ring represents something that no other item of jewelry does. It is the only thing other than the cross that has any kind of religious significance on your body if you're a Christian. Right? Remember what I said. It's a sign of the authority that you receive from the priest, which comes from God. And gives you the authority to establish your own little kingdom, which is your family. Right? You need to be given the authority to establish a family, ladies and gentlemen, not just going out there and fornicating, then, oh, whoops, now I've got a family. All right? And no one was like, oh, you know what, this, sorry, pastor, but that actually doesn't make any sense at all. Chances are, and because we all have children here, most of us, right? Chances are the child's just being obnoxious because you've reprimanded them. And that actually has got nothing to do with anything, right? Because this is another illogical thing, right? Does the ring fall under the category of jewelry? That is correct, yes. But did you know that an item can exist in more than one category? Right? So, for example, the cross, right? The cross falls under the category of jewelry, but it also falls under the category of religious symbolism, and therefore occupies a unique place that all other jewelry does not occupy. Right? Right? Even an atheist knows this. Okay? Anyone who's bothered, things can be in more than one category. Aren't we? Right? I can be father, I can be husband, I can be this, I can be that, I can be a whole bunch of different things. Objects can belong in more than one category. So it's a totally irrelevant. The fact that it is jewelry is not on its own enough to condemn it. Right? Because we allow, the Seventh-day Adventists allow religious symbolism. Go to their church, they'll have crosses and stuff all over the place, sort of thing. Well, you can't have it here or you can't have it there because now that's jewelry and now that's, no. Just because now it falls under a different category does not magically make it evil, right? And because of a hyper-literalistic, rationalistic reading of the Bible, which talks about which looks like it's speaking against jewelry, they misinterpret that and like it's speaking against jewelry. But there's a very different. So again, if you read it, it says, "Let not your adorning be gold and jewelry. Let it rather be a good character, right, sort of thing." The language in the Greek there is much softer. Don't let it be this, let it be that, sort of thing, versus the Ten Commandments, which is thou shalt not. Totally different language there, right? Completely different language, completely different style. This is why it pays to be literate. It's a totally different style in the way these things are talking about. And when you look at the imagery, when you look at what these things symbolize, go through the whole of the Bible, be like, oh, it's not talking against the object in principle. It's talking about the propensity of human beings to go for the narcissistic route rather than the other way, right? And if jewelry is a stumbling block to you, then fair enough, get rid of it. Throw it away, get rid of it. This is the thing. But it is your spiritual walk, right? It's your spiritual walk. It's not the same for everyone, right? You don't get to go around and telling people that they're going to go to hell or condemning them and doing this kind of thing. I'm not condemning, but I'm condemning passive aggressive nonsense either. Wasting time on this garbage when there's, Seventh-day Adventists, even though they've got they've got a good understanding of the Trinity, they still don't understand the Trinity fully like they should. So their triadology is still severely lacking, which means their Christology is severely lacking, which means that their order of theology is a mess. And this is the sort of thing that they waste their time on. And then they want to sit there and wonder, oh, why is there suddenly this surge of Arianism in the church? Well, it's because you guys waste time on stupidity, and you haven't even bothered to establish your proper order of theology. What's proper triadology, proper Christology, and then everything else falls into place. Because if they had proper triadology, they would understand the wedding, the significance of marriage, and all these kinds of things. That is a recapitulation of the triad, of the Trinity, and the relationship between Christ, God the Father, and Christ, how he gives him the bride and gives him authority, and there's the passing on of the authority, and the ring symbolize. We're not saying that God literally gives Jesus a ring, no, right? But it's ridiculous sort of thing. There's no nuance. There's no the glory of what we should retain the ring. And then if we had this knowledge, when the person asks, oh, aren't you a hypocrite for wearing the ring? You should say to them, brother, I'm so glad you asked. Let me explain to you the glory that is the typology of the married life and how it recapitulates the Trinity. Let me explain this to you, and we'll show you that this is not mere jewelry. This is a deeply religious, this is a deeply religious symbol and has deep significance. Let me tell you about it. Right? Obviously, you're not going to convince the person you're not a hypocrite if you're wearing something over there that costs more than some people will earn in 20 years. Don't do that, obviously. I mean, there's, let's be sensible. I know there's not a lot of common sense out there, but let's try. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, that is where we are. I hope this helps. Okay? Anyway, God bless you. Good night. It is midnight. But yeah, if you can't sleep because you're sick, might as well be productive, hey? Sort of thing. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for your time, and I thank you for your viewership and your support. God bless you. Cheerio. Goodbye.